Your house is worth whatever it's worth, right? Whoever sells it. Wrong. I'm Charlie. Welcome to Moving Home with Charlie, and thank you for coming.
Charlie Landing grew up in Sussex, is the founder of Best Agent and presenter of Moving Home with Charlie.
If you want to find one of these guys, look out for those compassionate professionals. All estate agents are not the same.
So Charlie, what would be your advice for people interested in buying new builds right now?
Don't overpay. Do buy, but don't overpay. That's why I say disregard the guff. Read into the numbers and look, and it's buried. The bad news is buried in the small print, okay?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Property Press Awards.
They may or may not be telling the truth, but you should form your own view. Get out and view, get out and view, get out and view. You cannot be in a position to make offers and have the offers accepted if you're not viewing. So be out there viewing. Pay attention to the back of the class if you've not been watching my videos. I did one just a couple of days ago. Disregard the guff, guys. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live stream on Moving Home with Charlie. With me, Charlie Lambden, and welcome back to all my existing subscribers, and a special welcome to any new subscribers watching tonight. Tonight is the kind of evening when I want to have a cup of tea. It's been one of those days. A cup of tea is quite comforting. Bit of a rough day. And I'm also going to get straight into the topic this evening and do a little bit of a market update after this, a little bit of reaction to what's been talked about. But I've had some feedback, which is get to the point of the video first. And that's a fair point. So for those of you watching the video, because of the title, I'm going to dive straight into this because I've been getting some questions about how to price a home fairly. And it's a really good question, and it deserves a little bit of thought, whether you're a seller or a buyer. And I like the question because my whole mission is to help movers. I'm not on a seller side or a buyer side. I'm on the side of movers. I'm on the side of good agents. I'm on the side of good movers, by which I mean reasonable movers. And if you are a reasonable person, your move is much more likely to go well. In fact, I will start with a tiny anecdote. I spoke to a very old friend of mine today, who's also been a childhood friend of mine who's been an estate agent his entire career, 30 years. And he was chatting with me about how he sets his fees with his clients. And he said, I just have a good long chat with them and I figure out just how difficult they're going to be. And if they're reasonable, I charge them quite a lot less. But if I can tell they're going to be difficult, I put the fee up because I just know they're going to be more work. So that's one of the reasons that estate agents don't often want to just come up with a fee up front, because it depends on how much of a pain in the arse you might be going to be as a client. Just saying, worth bearing in mind. Now, straight into this. There is a list, and I put them on the bottom of the screen, a list of factors that affect what the price, the fair transaction price for you and the counterparty and that property at that time, at that location. Okay. And I hope this is going to be helpful. You'll see it's completely neutral. It doesn't favor either side. It'll be completely neutral and impartial, and hopefully very helpful. Let's start with this. I'm going to refer to, so the first thing I put there is a property has an intrinsic value. And I'm going to just not waffle on about that, but just say, let's just say that that is the price at which a property would sell for at auction. Okay. Probably goes to auction, probably only investors going to buy it typically, and therefore they're going to be paying what one might think of as a trade price. Okay. The intrinsic value, that's like the baseline value. And then all of the others can then make that go higher or lower depending on certain things. And I've often talked about the three things, and the first three things on that list are the three variables. This is why, by the way, instant online automatic valuation tools are a load of guff. Okay. You cannot, nobody can price a property. Even qualified surveyors cannot predict exactly what a property is going to sell for, because there are other things that change the value of a transaction depending on the situation of the people involved in the transaction. Things like what I call the certainty premium and time or risk values of a transaction. Okay. All of which are real factors to the parties to a transaction, but don't necessarily make the property itself worth any more or less. And that is why the only honest answer that an estate agent can give you when you ask them, how much can you get for my house? The only honest answer they can give you is, we don't know. But what we will do is make sure we get you the maximum possible price by making sure we get competing buyers. No matter what the market is doing, if you do it correctly and you market it well and you price it correctly, you will get competing buyers. And with competing buyers, you will find out what the market for that property is worth. So, point number one, desirability. Now, desirability is a strange thing, and it varies depending on who you are. And of course, some properties are more desirable to some buyers than others. Most sellers have got a little bit of optimism or bias about just how desirable their home is going to be to other people. And most agents have to actually just put up with that a lot and just say, oh yeah, the seller thinks their home is magical. They think their home is lovely. And of course you do, because if you've lived somewhere, you've put lots of love into that home, you've invested in it, and you've grown to love it probably. And therefore to you, it is a special place. But that doesn't mean it's going to be special to other people. I remember viewing a house myself years ago, and the owner was so proud of it. And it was hideous. I mean, it was awful, the decor and everything else. But the owner was so, so proud. So desirability is very subjective. However, two identical properties next door to each other, one with a brand new state-of-the-art kitchen, one with a kitchen that hasn't been modernized for 20 years, won't change the value of the property, but it will change the desirability. And therefore, the one with the nice kitchen is probably likely to get more. I mean, if there's only enough appetite for one, then the one with the nice kitchen is going to sell because it's more desirable, right? And it's a crude example, but you see what I'm saying? A lot of people think if I spend £10,000 doing up my property, then that will put £10,000 onto the value. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It's not that straightforward a calculation. And I know of some sellers at the moment who've been making that mistake in their calculations of what the property is worth. Well, we paid this much for it, then we spent £50,000 on it, so now it must be worth this plus 50. No, you customized it with your money. You made it how you wanted to. That doesn't mean you added value to it. It's important to remember that. Yes, of course, renovations will typically put on, in a normal rising market, renovations will put on more than the cost of the renovation. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it. So that's the desirability, okay? And desirability is a totally subjective, emotional thing, but it will affect a property's sale price. Now, next thing I've got is seller. The seller's situation is crucial to the equation of working out what a fair price is, because there is a long list of different situations that the seller of a property may be in, and each of those different situations will place a different pressure on the need to sell, on the speed of the sale they need, on the reason for the sale, and whether they're actually committed or not. So what is a seller's commitment level to the sale? Must they sell? Or are they just trying to cash in on price rises? And if they don't get the fantasy price they want, are they actually going to pull out and decide not to sell? I mean, in my mind, sellers that will not sell unless they get the price they want aren't real sellers. They're chancers. All right. And I know some of you watching this are maybe in that situation and thinking, well, hang on, Charlie, steady on. I'm afraid it's just a true. And I would say this to any member of my own family and friends. I'd say, if you're only selling because you think you can get that much money for it, then your reason for selling is cashing in, not because you need to move. And therefore, you're not a committed seller. And that will affect the potential price of a transaction, or whether there's even a chance of a transaction. And of course, that can be a big waste of people's time. Sometimes it's unavoidable, sometimes it is avoidable, but the seller's situation is crucial. And as a buyer going into a transaction, you really want to understand as much as possible about the seller's situation. Most agents will not give away personal circumstances of their seller because they don't want to, especially if it disadvantages the seller in a negotiation. So you're not necessarily going to find out the real details from an agent, unless the agent is fed up with that seller and actually just wants to get it sold and therefore just spills the beans about the seller's situation. That happens. That will happen. When an agent has put in so much time and effort and work trying to sell a seller's property, and the seller just will not climb down off the shelf, and the agents get fed up with how much time they've wasted trying to sell it, they're just, I'm just going to try and do whatever I can to get offers here, so I'm just going to be honest. But do try and find out. You should be able to find out whether or not the seller is dependent on finding a new home before they'll move out. Now, that is a very, very typical situation. And that's a very difficult one to know because, of course, the seller may not know what they can find to buy until they know what they're going to sell for the house. There is some genuine and reasonable uncertainty on the part of people who are selling to buy, because there are certain things that they won't know. They won't know what price they're going to have accepted on a home they've found to buy. They don't know how much they're going to sell for their home. They will make assumptions when they begin the transaction in good faith, and then things don't pan out that way, and that's just life, right? That happens. But then, of course, you get the very unrealistic ones where it's a different story. But you need to know. So is it a probate sale? Is it some siblings selling their parents' property after their parents have passed on? And it's going to get sold for whatever they can get for it. Or might it be the case that if they don't get what they want for it, they're going to rent it out? And again, you want to know that as a buyer. So the seller's situation will affect it. If the seller, for example, let me give you a random example, has an urgent requirement to relocate for work, or an urgent requirement to relocate for family reasons or personal reasons, the chances are that will, unless the property is particularly desirable, has lots of buyers competing, that may reduce the price, especially in a falling market, because they need certainty. And that will come on to certainty in a minute, right? But all of these things will affect the price. And what I'm saying is all of these things have nothing to do with the property itself, do they? And yet they're all factors that affect the price. So as a buyer, considering what a fair price is, you've got to ask yourself, what's the seller's situation and what's a reasonable expectation of a seller in that situation? And is the seller being reasonable? Because without both sides being reasonable, a fair price is very difficult to achieve. Because if one side or other side is unreasonable, and I've come across this recently with a landlord who wanted to sell to the tenant loved the property. The landlord knew this. It wasn't on the open market, and was basically recognizing that the buyer was in love with it and wanted to buy it, and was holding out for what was potentially an unreasonably high price, but trying to cash in and exploit the fact that the buyer really, really wanted it. Now, that's a dangerous game. Sometimes it'll pay off, and sometimes you'll get your buyer to overpay doing that. And, that happens. Is it fair? I don't think so. Because would you have got the same price rate on the open market? Possibly. It might have taken you another 6 months. So I in that particular situation, I don't know whether that was particularly fair. And the other way around as well. If a buyer knows that a seller is absolutely desperate for personal reasons, then they might exploit that and go in too low and leave the seller with no choice. And that's not really fair either. I think it's whether or not you come down to being someone that has the attitude where, I like to treat other people how I'd like to be treated, or whether you just want to batter them over the head and it's dog eat dog and kill or be killed. To me, that's the zero-sum game. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But in the long run, I've always found that adopting an approach of fairness works. So that's the seller scenario. The buyer's scenario: are you a cash buyer? Are you really sure you want to buy that property? Because a lot of buyers have offers accepted and then change their minds and back out, and in doing so waste the time of the seller and the agent. But it happens. They do it in good faith, and it just happens. Are you a buyer with a property to sell? If so, what stage is that at? How long will it take you to complete? All of these things will affect the price that the seller might accept. Because if a seller has got competing offers, and maybe one is from an investor who's got cash, one is from a first-time buyer who hasn't got the mortgage ready yet, one is from a seller who's got to sell in order to buy, each of those has a different level of certainty and therefore a different level of attractiveness over and above the actual amount they're offering. It'll be factored in. And of course, again, this comes down to the certainty premium and the time or risk value. And I realize I'm not giving you a mathematical formula here, and I'll come on to that in a minute as to why. Because so many of these things, desirability, seller situation, especially remembering that a lot of people are forced into selling for high stress reasons and emotional reasons, and buyers as well, especially first-time buyers, can have a lot of uncertainty about it. There is an enormous amount of swirling emotion in property transactions, and that is something that very few people understand until they've been through a transaction themselves. And it is a fact of life that estate agents have to deal with on a daily basis. People making very irrational decisions because of the very high levels of emotion involved on both sides of the transaction, which makes estate agency extremely difficult. Certainty premium. As a buyer, if there are other buyers bidding and you have a pressing, urgent need to buy a home in that location and you've got the funds available, you may choose to knowingly overpay in order to secure the certainty. That's what I refer to as the certainty premium. Okay. And that, when you compare what your situation will be if you don't secure that property, there's nothing else available. You're then going to have to go into rent it for 6 months or whatever might happen. There might be other costs you're having to accrue. That certainty premium may make sense for you in your situation. It doesn't mean the property is worth it necessarily. It's just worth it to you. Okay. And again, some buyers may be happy to pay a certainty premium, some buyers won't. If you watch that film of my colleague Sam selling her house, that's exactly what happened. There were 4 offers already, and then a 5th buyer came in and was told about the 4 offers and the approximate level of that, and just came in, bang, about 7 or 8% higher because they just wanted to. They didn't want to get into a bidding. It's like, we want that property, we can afford it, bang, and they knowingly overpaid just for the certainty value. And certainty value is very valuable in life, but you can't really put a number on it, can you? So one of those intangible weird things that you can't put into a spreadsheet or a calculation, but just to you personally, it's worth it. Then you've got the time values. So you've got desirability, seller, buyer, certainty premium. And on the seller side, a certainty premium might be, I'm going to drop the price because the cash buyer can complete very fast. That gives me certainty as a seller. So I am effectively paying a certainty premium as the seller to go to a lower price to get certainty of the sale, or increased certainty, even if not 100%. Now, time values. With time comes uncertainty, and there is a very strong correlation on the graph of the relationship between time, how long it takes between offer agreed and exchange, and fall through rate. And it's a it's not a direct straight line, because for the first few weeks it's quite low, and then it starts to go up. And the longer you take, the higher that rate of uncertainty, or the higher the chance of a fall through is. Okay, so it's worth bearing this in mind, especially in a falling market, because if, as a seller I know of yesterday had happened to them, you are at the end of the conveyancing period. You've had your offer agreed 5 months ago. You're very, very close to exchange, and at the last minute, something crops up that scuppers your sale, and that's been happening during a falling market. That's a nightmare situation. So the time value, you've got to understand, if you are a buyer and you don't have certainty, so if you're a first-time buyer and your mortgage is ready, then the only time uncertainty is the time to get the mortgage, the lender's valuation agreed, and to get the conveyancing done. And one of the things that's outside everyone's control is how long it takes to get council searches back, which is why, and guys, I'm just talking to a company about making property searches available to buyers and sellers in advance. And they are incredibly keenly priced. And I think, especially in these scenarios, are immensely valuable when you're working out how much you want to offer. And you can get the whole process started sooner. So searches can take sometimes a couple of months. All right. And that's outside anybody's control. And that puts a risk on the deal falling through. All right. So now there's one other topic I want to come on to about how to price a home fairly, which is that sometimes there won't even be the opportunity to ask that question because there are other people bidding. And therefore, if you're a buyer, either you're going to be the highest bidder, the highest credible, proceedable bidder, or you're not. And if you're not, then this is a moot question anyway. Either yours is the best bid, or you don't get the property, and therefore this question doesn't come up. But where this question is arising quite often in this market is where there are far fewer transactions happening on some properties, and some sellers have waited for a while, and then they have found a buyer, and it is buyers who've been asking me this question: how do I price it fairly? And I think in that situation, one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, if for some unknown reason I had to immediately turn around and sell the property, do I think I'd get that money that I paid for it back? Now, you might go, well, I accept that house prices are falling slowly. Let's say they're falling, 1% a month, just for easy calculation. So I accept that if it took me 6 months to sell, I'd be losing 6% on the house. And you might go, yeah, so factoring that in, yes, that's still a fair price. But if you think to yourself, if I pay that price now, there's no chance of getting anything anywhere near it. It's probably a bit too high. So what I tend to find, and I know this is very wishy-washy, but if you have gradually developed that skill of trusting your instincts, you will get a feeling when you work out the numbers. And what you've got to do is, if you come up with a number that you think, well, that feels like the right number, and then this is what I do. I go through the following exercise. I go, right, okay, I'm going to imagine making that offer, and what do I think that I'm going to feel like after I've made it? So if I've made it, if I make the offer and it gets accepted, does that make me feel excited and happy, or does that make me feel a bit of a ooh? Then if it makes you feel a bit ooh when you imagine the offer being accepted, you're overpaying. Okay. And similarly, if you're underpaying and you're someone that wants to pay a fair price for all the reasons that we've talked about, again, your conscience will tell you if it's not really a fair price. I mean, there are people who would say, you know what, sellers have had it good for so long that now it's the buyer's turn to beat them over the head with it. But in the individual scenario of you're buying a house from someone who's maybe lived there for 30 years and hasn't been part of the selling frenzy and hasn't been cashing in on the big rises and hasn't been beating buyers over the head and making them pay more and more. Actually, they just bought their house innocently 30 years ago and now they're selling it. Maybe they don't deserve that harsh treatment. Maybe they just deserve to get the fair market value for their house right now. These are tough questions, guys. And I'm sorry if these aren't helpful answers. What I hope I'm doing is giving you food for thought so that in your scenario, you can say to yourself, have I factored in the desirability, the seller's situation, I mean, I'm going to give you an example. I know of someone who owned a property, a commercial property it was, and they'd owned it their whole career, and it was a garage, a servicing garage, petrol station servicing, MOTs, that kind of stuff. And they came to the point of retiring and they wanted to retire and they wanted to sell up. When they came to sell up, the commercial agent said to them, McDonald's have put in a massive bid for your site. And he went, and he decided actually, no. And he sold it to a couple of younger mechanics who wanted to take over the business. He said, I don't want my garage to turn into a drive to McDonald's. I want it to be a garage, and I want to give some younger people a chance to have a nice lifelong career in business. And for him, he turned down a higher price to get what was still, after after decades of owning it outright, a very, very nice chunk of money, plenty for him for his retirement, and he got the satisfaction of helping some other guys up and giving them a start in life. And it's nice when people do that, and I think there's value. And I think when you do that for other people, that's been done for me by people actually as well. And it's immensely valuable and it increases the chances of me wanting to do it for others. So I think it's always a good idea to look yourself in the mirror and go, am I being fair? And if you're being fair and you know that your offer is fair and the seller doesn't accept it, then you hold your ground and go, this is a fair offer. There aren't any other offers around. I think that's fair value. But it's tough, right? It's tough to see straight. It's tough to be objective when it's your own money, in your own house, and your own life, your own emotions involved. It is a difficult thing to do. So I don't know. I don't know how helpful that's been or not, guys. But some people have asked me, for example, what if I work out the average price of that property type in that area in the last thing? Well, I don't think. I mean, certainly do that to get a feel, but there are very few average properties, if you know what I mean. Every property is unique, and therefore it might not, and that might make it go too far one way or the other. It might end up giving you a number that's too high or too low for that particular property. I suppose all of this is to say that there isn't a calculation as such. Buying and selling homes is a highly emotive process, which is why there isn't a price calculator, because the transaction price isn't just the value of the property, it's the value of the transaction to the parties involved as well. Right. With that, I'm now going to spend just 5 more minutes updating on the market. And then have you got any questions on this? Hi, everybody. Eddie, Fee, Pin, Matthew, Annie, Koi Big 20. guys, I'm afraid I can never make suggestions on offers for properties I haven't seen, don't know anything about. I can't do that, unfortunately. Kevin, hi there. Catherine, John Snow, Paddy, Wallpaper Guy. I'm skimming over with Sarah, Catherine, Kelly, hi there. Oh, there's some good questions there. They're not relevant to the video though, so I'm going to just look for ones that are. Oh, Wallpaper Guy. You got your new place for 12% under thanks to my tactics. Brilliant. That's good to know. Just looking for questions here. Does anyone have any questions? No, they didn't sell it to McDonald's. Richard Armstrong Finity. No, they didn't sell it to McDonald's. They sold it to the guys who are now around the garage. Okay, quiet one. What are my estate agents saying? Is demand getting worse? In a nutshell, the summary of the feedback that I'm getting is that agents are getting busier with more people wanting to put their house on the market. I had a phone call from an agent yesterday saying, I am rushed off my feet. Everybody wants to sell. It's split. I've got a bunch of people coming to the market for the first time who've suddenly decided they want to get on really quickly. And I've got a bunch of people who've been on the market for a while with corporates, and they're fed up with the corporates and they want to change agent. But no, there is some demand everywhere, but not at the prices that sellers are asking, generally speaking. Let me get into a couple of quick things I want to share with you. I thought this was a very interesting article on the Telegraph today. So someone who owns a mortgage broker. I'm a mortgage expert. Buy-to-let is dead and buried. It's a really interesting article. I've put the link to that in the description below. But I'm going to go down to one paragraph that really caught my eye. Whether it's a house to live in or a place to rent out, we are talking about the homes of millions of families and individuals across the country. There is a huge systemic shock building up due to the bank rate moving from 0.1% to 4% in a little over 12 months. So to those of you with your fingers on the trigger, I say this: erring on the side of caution might actually help save the day, and with it, the finances of millions of people. Pretty eye-opening opinion. For those of you who are hoping interest rates are going to come down, I'm afraid I think it's false hope. There's an article on Bloomberg today, why inflation may not be heading back to 2%. I've put a link below to this as well, I think. I'll double check. There is a podcast on it, which is free to listen to. You don't need to be a Bloomberg subscriber, where they talk about why the guest, Pippa Malmgren, says it's more likely to stay around 4 to 5% inflation. And the podcast explains why. I then had an email from someone that I'm not going to put on screen because I want to keep it anonymous, from an investor. And this investor said to me, I know I'm an investor and you're only here to help home movers, but I actually thought I'd email you to point this. And I'm glad that they did email me. He forwarded me a newsletter from an investment magazine. And he said, I thought that for some time they are guilty of optimism bias, and your channel has only served to confirm this. At best, I suspect they are still in phase 1, denial, as you outlined this week. Landlords are clearly exiting the market, but whether they are the amateur accidental landlords or professionals, I don't know. But I do know that I'm finding it incredibly hard to find deals where the numbers work, that I cannot be alone, and that this must serve to contribute to the wider housing crash you have been warning us about. That was an interesting thing from an investor, property investor, who's looking for deals. Richard asks a question. Do I think Jeremy Hunt's upcoming budget will help or ignore the housing situation? In a word, I think it's going to ignore it. I don't think they're going to do anything to prop the housing market up now, for a number of reasons that I'm not going to go into now. But they have stated that Help to Buy is ended, not being extended, and no plans to replace it. And I also think that anything that they were going to do to try and prop up the housing market to help support votes. Given that there's not going to be an election this year, and it's probably going to be sometime next year, the budget this time next year is the budget at which I might expect them to pull out some support measures for the housing market to try and look good in the run-up to the election. And of course, the further that the market goes down in the meantime, the more heroes they're going to look like coming in to save the which will be around about at the end of phase 2. So at the bottom of the steep slide of housing prices that I think is going to happen in phase 2 in the next 12 months. Quiet one. Yes, I agree. UK bank rate isn't going below 4% for years. Possibly 5% is likely. We've got, tomorrow we've got the RICS monthly property market survey out tomorrow. That'll be interesting. And we've then got the week after, I think it is, we've got the Bank of England's next base rate decision. I think the markets are priced in 0.25%. Some people think it might be 0.5%. There are some Bank of England guys saying, no, don't put it up at all. I would probably, if I was a gambling man, go for the 0.25%, but not be surprised if it was 0.5%. I would be surprised if they don't raise them. Tygonosaurus, that's a good question. You mentioned local searches take a long time for the council. Does getting the searches from someone else mean you don't have to? No, it has to be done by the council. It's unavoidable. These are council searches. The company that I'm going to be working with, it provides average timelines for all councils around the country. It's Property Searches Direct. So that you can see up front, so that everyone going into transaction knows how long the council searches take. Some councils are very fast, can be a couple of weeks. Some can take months. And in a falling market, if you're a seller, you don't want your transactions taking months. You really don't. Ladies and gents, if there aren't any... All right, so this is a very common question. Keith Morrison, hi, you must be relatively new to the channel. Welcome. I don't recognize the name. Sell my flat now, rent, and wait for prices to drop. If you're only just thinking about that now, depending on where you are, what part of the country you're in. I mean, if you're in the northwest is behind the curve in terms of the house prices coming down. The northwest property market is still holding up stronger than the rest of the country. I do think it will come down as well. I don't think it'll come down as far as the rest of the country. The southeast is seeing the fastest and farthest falls so far, just anecdotally and just very generally north and south. So to answer that question, Keith, I'd have to know which market that you are in and whether or not it's already begun its slide or not. On average, I would say you're about 6 months late to that party. I think if you decide to go to the market now, you're going to be joining the rush of sellers coming on in the next couple of months. Have a bad day, or have bad day says, hey Charlie, it's not FYI, it's not just housing. The classic car market and the Rolex watch market are in decline. It doesn't surprise me at all. So Amir Ahmed asks, what are the key new indicators, I suppose you mean, coming out this month that can affect property market? The RICS survey out tomorrow. The RICS sentiment survey is actually the most accurate, historically, the most accurate predictor of house prices. And then, of course, we've got the base rate decision that will affect it as well. The estate agents I deal with are around the country, all over. Annie. Oh yeah, and I'd just like to address the best agent situation. So I thank you to all of you who have been looking at best agent for properties. Many of you have been giving me the feedback that there are quite a lot of out-of-date properties on there. This is an issue that we are aware of, and it is being fixed as we speak. It is a colossal piece of tech, and there are roughly 1.5–2 million records in there, updating constantly, all of them changing all the time. And to do that purely automatically with software, it's quite a big job. To do it sustainably, we are fixing it. In fact, as we speak, there's a sort of massive script running that's fixing that particular problem. Please do keep using it, keep trying it. The online viewing booking for new homes has had an issue this week that we're fixing. The find your agent function is working well. We're getting a lot of you looking for your agent using Best Agent. But Best Agent is by far the biggest piece of tech that the residential property industry has ever seen in this country. Okay, because it is like a national property site like Rightmove, combined with a national CRM system, combined with a back office system for suppliers, combined with the list could go on. It's got video technology in there for video viewings coming up, but video messages with leads, and it is a quantum leap ahead of everything else in the market, and it is a very large piece of technology. We have a relatively very small team. Running Best Agent is my full-time everyday job, so please keep trying it. If you're finding it's not helpful, then obviously that's fine. I get that, but please keep giving feedback. So when you find properties that are inaccurate, got mistakes on them for some reason, there's a button that you can click to report that to us. It's very helpful when you do that. And sending any feedback you get, it is all really helpful. So bestagent.co.uk if you're looking for homes or looking for agents anywhere in England and Wales. And I'm looking forward to updating on the data on that soon, guys. Nick Jones asks, do cash buyers get a discount? Well, because cash buyers can proceed with much higher levels of certainty. I mean, a cash buyer can pull out as well, don't forget. Generally speaking, in a falling market, cash buyers will get a lower price than people buying with a mortgage, which is another factor to remember when you're looking at the Halifax House Price Index, which says prices are going up. I really want to stress this. The Halifax House Price Index is seasonally adjusted. It's not what actually happened. It's what happened and then a seasonal adjustment applied to it. And to give you an idea of how different that can be, the Bank of England's figures for mortgages in January, seasonally adjusted, were, and this is what they put out as the official figures, were 39,000 mortgage approvals. The actual number was 29,000. It was 25% lower, was the actual number when you didn't seasonally adjust it. Okay, so lots of people going, oh, house prices are going up, Halifax says so. No chance. Any other questions? Guys, at the start of this video, there was one space left on the experimental first-time buyers members group that I'm doing a test with. Out of the 50 places, there's one left. The link is below if you want to take that last slot, and then I'm going to be doing the first private live stream for that group soon. It's going to be exciting. Looking forward to that. And that first one is going to be mostly asking you exactly what I can do that's going to help the most first-time buyers. Guys, I also get a lot of people sort of just asking for any advice. That's a very, very general thing. And again, when all I get is a 2-bed flat in a certain area, no, I haven't got any advice on that other than the general advice on selling and buying. I cannot give advice on individual prices because I know nothing about the situation. There might be all kinds of problems that probably I don't know about, so I cannot ever advise on price. I'm afraid it's something you've got to figure out yourself. But if you're renting the property, you want to buy it, again, I would just work out the price that feels right to you, that factors in the certainty value that you want, etc. And don't go above what is comfortable for you to afford. That's all I can say to everybody. Oh no, Kyle, don't apologize. I just you're new. Welcome. You didn't know this, and I'm repeating that because there are new people on all of these live streams, and you haven't heard me say this before. It's absolutely perfectly okay to ask. I just, for the benefit of your question, reminded me that I need to remind people that I can't ever give individual advice on an individual property or an individual price. Oopsie. Oh, John Rocks asks a great question. So yeah, I've got and in fact, I want to just put that up on the screen and remind everybody because where are the mortgage guys? Oh, I've lost the link. So I work with some hand-picked mortgage brokers who I really trust and who are really good. And if you don't have a mortgage in principle lined up, then mhwc.co.uk/mortgage. Pop your details in there and I'll put you in touch with them. Am I going to be doing it with conveyancers and surveyors? Yes, in due course, I absolutely am going to be doing that. Before I do the conveyancers, though, I'm going to be doing the searches which I think is going to be incredibly helpful. So direct to consumer, all kinds of searches about hazards, about environmental searches, about flood risks, all that kind of stuff. Things that if you are considering buying a property and considering putting an offer on a property will be immensely valuable to you. And if you do buy the property, it will speed up the whole conveyancing process as well. And if you're thinking of selling as well, very useful stuff as well. So that's going to be the next thing coming, and it's going to be coming soon. I'm in discussions with the company about setting it up to provide you with that, guys. And that's going to be basically direct to consumer, a whole range of different searches, which you can decide for yourself which ones are valuable, which ones aren't, and go ahead and buy them if you want to. So ultimately, yes, I do want to make sure that I can provide a marketplace of hand-picked partners, mortgaging partners, surveying partners, conveyancing partners, etc., that I will take some accountability for the quality of what they do, because I really want people to be able to find reliable suppliers of these essential services for when you're moving house. I've gone 10 minutes over. I do love answering your questions, guys. I really do. And there's so many videos I want to do that I just don't have time to do because I'm working on Best Agent all the time. I'm not a mortgage. For those of you who are new, I cannot advise on mortgages. If you've got mortgage questions, go to my links. Down below, I've also linked to my link tree where you'll find links to all my sites, including the mortgage form. Jimmy, I'm afraid I haven't got any thoughts on Scotland at the moment. Okay, the last question. How best to introduce the cost of rent? I don't think that itemizing your reasons for lowering your price ever helps, because all you're doing is you're providing an objection that can be overcome. I genuinely think that you work out your own reasons for your offer and you make your offer. You don't want to get into a debate and a dialogue about it. You just, I mean, unless it's about fairness, but generally speaking, it's just make your offer. Don't explain it. Just work it out. Say that's our offer. Just say that's what the property is worth to us. Don't need to give any more explanations about what your plans are for it, that kind of stuff. That's all personal and frankly irrelevant. I think it's better to just work out your offer and put it in. John, I do have one firm that's been recommended to me by people I trust, but I haven't yet checked them out personally, and I don't want to make any recommend. I have a conveyancer that I use, my secret weapon conveyancer, who I've used since I bought my first flat in the mid-90s, who is just a genius, but he is expensive and he's busy. I'm just rambling now. I'm going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next one, which will be soon. All the best. Love and luck to everybody. And be nice. Bye.